Thank you for the introduction. I'm Keisuke Hayashi from Hosei University Junior and Senior High School. Today, I will speaking on translation as a literary vehicle, Haruki Murakami's shift from male writers to a female writer and its impact on his writing practice. In 2020, when Murakami translated The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, he quoted Carson McCullers, a writer of personal significance, and even said, "She will be the one who speaks to me most intimately among all female authors." Still, Murakami admitted he hesitated to take on the project. He said, quote, "I wasn't entirely sure how today's readers in Japan, especially younger readers, would receive it," unquote. This shows that Murakami approached the translation with careful thought about its cultural and generational impact. Murakami has often used translation to broaden his literary community. As Toko puts it, he is a passionate fan of popular culture. Early in his career, Murakami most exclusively translated works by male authors: F. Scott Fitzgerald, Raymond Chandler, J.D. Salinger, and Truman Capote. And he said that, through them, I found myself compelled to write fiction. These translations not only shaped his own style, but also helped him connect with contemporary Japanese readers. Several critics have explored how these translations influenced his fiction. Nihei Chikako argues that Murakami's work on Fitzgerald works helped him distance himself from Japan's literary circle. Rebecca Suda points out that his narrative framing, especially in The Great Gatsby, influenced Murakami's own use of similar double frame in the stories. Jonathan Dale adds that translating authors like Fitzgerald and Chandler allowed Murakami to transform his therapeutic motive into compelling literary fiction. This raises an important question. What happened when Murakami translated a female writer? Back in 1988, Murakami translated Grace Perry's short stories. At that time, he admitted, quote, "To be honest, I don't really enjoy this type of women's fiction," unquote. But despite that, it marked a major turning point. He began shifting from the casual first person pronoun boku to the more natural or more neutral one watashi, and also began experimenting with third person narration. This change is evident in works like After the Quake, his Gatsby translation, and Kirin Komantore. Paley's influence helped Murakami broaden his narrative voice. After translating Paley, Murakami turned to Carson McCullers. Today, I will explore how this work shaped his fiction, focusing especially on his stories, recent Kaho and its sequel, Anteater in the Sakai. We will look at first the connection between McCullers' themes and Murakami's writing. Second, how the Ballad of the Sad Cafe parallels the series of Kaho. Third, and how Murakami wrote Kaho, which shows the evolution of his female narrative voice. Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak sees collectivity as a core theme in Makkar's writing, especially in her debut novel, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, which deals with the irreducible separation is based on race, class, and sex struggle. Jane Shapland later revealed that McCullers had a deep emotional bond with her therapist, Mary Mather, and that this relationship influenced the Ballad of the Sad Cafe. Contrary to earlier readings that focused on McCullers' troubled marriage, Shapland shows that McCullers feared her husband's return and instead dedicated the story to his partner, writing, quote, Darling, the ballad of the Sad Cafe is for you, unquote. Maka's work continues to attract attention for the way it reflects her social struggles and personal issues. However, Murakami didn't choose Makara's for these personal and social themes. He translated her works out of personal interest, starting with The Member of the Wedding, and only later translating her earlier novels, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter and The Ballad of the Sad Cafe. This non-linear approach reflects how the act of translation itself contributed to a shift in Murakami's narrative style, rather than any direct engagement with her biography and literary accomplishment. When working on The Member of the Wedding, Murakami commented, There's simply no way I could ever write a novel like this, because, as he put it, I'm a male writer. But he also said that even female writers might feel the same, because McCullers captured the emotional world of a young girl in such a unique way. The character, Frankie, is a 12-year-old girl desperate to join her brother and his bride on their honeymoon. She says, quote, I love the two of you so much, and you are the we of me. Please take me with you. Unquote. Murakami admired how McCullers gave voice to a young girl's deep longing and identity, something he felt he could not have written himself. This influence appears in his King Mantole, especially in the character Marie, a 13-year-old girl. After visiting her neighbor, Wataru Menshiki, Marie returns and says, I was at Mr. Menshiki's house, and the narrator said that she and I were in the studio. However, when Marie went inside the wall, quote, I stole in here like a burglar, she thought. I'm breaking the law, unquote. At that moment, the narrative shifts. The same first person pronoun watashi is used for both the male protagonist and for Marie. This creates a kind of double I narrative. Just like Frankie, Macca's novel longs to be part of a we. King Mantore explores a similar blending of identities, a shared emotional space. In The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, another 12-year-old girl, Mick, feels deeply disappointed by the world, but still holds on to hope. She says, quote, and it was two, and it was two, and it was two, and it was two. It was some good, unquote. Murakami admired this emotional complexity, calling Maka's view a sorrowful world with rare clarity. For Murakami, it is this emotional complexity that defines Maka's world. We see a similar sense of emotional introspection in Murakami's first person singular. In the title story, the narrator, again using watashi, looks in the mirror and asks, quote, if this isn't me in the mirror, then who is it? Unquote. Yano Toshihiro argues that this illustrates how watashi shaped by convenient memory may well have chosen to forget the violence. In this reading, the first person voice reflects a selective memory, one that may overlook past wrongs. In other words, watashi can still carry the limits of a male perspective, which doesn't fully understand the world of women, even as Murakami tries to shift beyond it. Let's turn to the birth of the Sad Cafe. Murakami wrote that we find ourselves unable to fully empathize with any of the three central characters and asked, what kind of novel is this really? Rather than focusing on characters, he highlights the different forms of love in the story. As McCarthy's writer puts it, quote, the value and quality of any love is determined solely by the lover himself, unquote. This suggests that love is defined by the lover, not necessarily by mutual understanding. That same idea echoes throughout Murakami's story, Kaho. In Kaho, the female protagonist faces verbal abuse from a man named Sahara. He asks, was she really that ugly? And wonders, why doesn't this woman feel hurt? She, since she doesn't react like others would. As he puts it, quote, we are not that far apart, you and I, unquote. Sahara has feelings for Kaho, yet it's a strange and complex kind of love, one that mirrors Makka's idea of love that doesn't depend on empathy. Kaho responds not with confrontation, but by sorry, Kaho responds not with confrontation, but by creating a picture book about a girl who goes in search of her faith. The journey becomes a metaphor for rebuilding identity. Importantly, she doesn't recover her face through a compliment. I've never seen a woman with such a lovely face as yours. Instead, she finds it through her all sorts of experiences, all kinds of emotions and thoughts. The lost face symbolizes the loss of subjectivity, something Kahori claims through storytelling. In writing the picture book, she writes herself into being. It's a process of self authorship. In contrast, the male figure, Sahara, loses both his name and his face in the picture book. It suggests that the book isn't just about Kaho, it's also about the man who loses his identity. In the sequel, Anteater in Sakai, the story moves in a direction more akin to Makara's idea of love. At first, Kaho questions the surreal nature of the story. Why an anteater? Have I lost my mind? But gradually, she begins to understand. The anteaters appear to protect her from the man on the motorcycle, possibly a stand-in for Sahara. Later in the story, the anteater asks Kaho to kill a man who has been taken over by the jaguar that ate their children. She resists at first, asking, quote, but why must I be the one to kill this man? Unquote. Still, she ultimately kills the jaguar for the sake of the eaters. Again, Kaho tries to turn this strange emotional experience into a picture book. But she realized that having the protagonist kill an animal in a picture book may be too disturbing for children. Through atypical for children story, this act is typical in the world of small animals. Quote, in this jungle, Kaho from Musashi Sakai is pretty famous. She's like a heroine. Unquote. This suggests that Kaho's story goes beyond cultural boundaries. The setting in Brazil adds to this. It's a place of new possibilities and different moral codes. Let's now look at how Murakami wrote Kaho. Murakami first presented Kaho during a public record of reading with Mieko Kawakami in 2024. It was then published in Shincho magazine, followed by its sequel. But later, the story was revised and reimagined for Brutus magazine in 2025. This shift reflects changes in three key elements: the anteater character, her mother's face, and the picture book itself. In the Shinto version, the anteater is linked to the man Sahara. He seems to read Kaho's thoughts, quote, like an anteater licking an anthill clean, unquote. But in the Brutus version, the anteater is described as licking a white anthill, which connects directly to the sequel Anteater in the Sakai, where Kaho tries to receive the bottled white ants for the anteater. Moreover, as she narrated, what she imagined was a large black female anteater. The anteater is not male, but female, and clearly part of Kaho's imagination. This transformed the anteater from a reflection of the abuser to a symbol of her protection and inner strength. In the Shinto version, the girl in the picture book, which Kaho created, goes through a lot, but she never actually meets the anteater. However, in the Brutus version, as Murakami put it, she passed by a gentle anteater couple. The anteater shows up not only in Kaho's real world, but also in her picture book. Also, they warned the girl about the jaguar. Please be, be please be very careful of the vicious jaguar. We realize it's the same one that attacked the anteater's children in the sequel. This shift deepens the symbolic link between Kaho and the heroine of her story. They become two reflections of the same self, bridging the gap between reality and imagination. There's also a change in how her family is portrayed. In the Shinto version, Kaho is an only child. In Brutus, we get more detail, especially about her mother's face, which is described as beautiful. However, Kaho says, quote, she had inherited more of her father's DNA and she didn't much care for her mother's face. This shows her emotional distance from her parents and from her biological identity. Instead, her, her real sense of self comes from her connection with the anteaters. This ties into the idea of fate, which Sahara introduces to her. In Shinto, Sahara tells her, quote, front and back, credit and debit, that's the way the world is, unquote. It's a transactional view of life, implying that everything is already balanced and determined. In Brutus, this idea is reframed more explicitly. You could call it fate. This suggests that she's bound by something she can't control, like DNA or destiny. But Kaho chooses a different path. She decides to become the anteater's child, not because of fate, but because of choice. This marks a rejection of passive identity and a move toward self-authorship. Even the act of creating the picture book changes. In Shincho, quote, it didn't take long to finish, unquote, suggesting it was a simple task. In Brutus, quote, it took her until dawn because this dream meant a lot to her, unquote. The act of storytelling becomes more personal and emotional, adding depth to the ending. The two versions also end differently. The Shinto version illustrates that, quote, she and the young man were married, unquote. But in Brutus, this is described as, quote, just like the typical ending of picture book, unquote. It suggests a more critical view. The sequel, Anteater in Sakai, then breaks that mold. The girls kill the jaguar, not something you would expect from a children's story. But in the world of animals, it makes sense. In the end, the meaning is left open depending on how the readers interpret these different layers. It asks who we are and who this story is really for. To conclude, how has translating Makkara's influenced Murakami's writing? First, translating Makkara's opened new narrative possibilities for Murakami, especially in representing female voices through first person narrative, watashi. Second, while the ballad of the cafe presents love as strange and unbalanced, Kaho resists male misogyny through storytelling, not confrontation. Even when Kaho stops writing, her story is embraced by the world of small animals. Finally, the Shincho and Bruce's versions deepen Kaho's narrative. The anteaters, her mother's face, and the picture book all show how storytelling reshapes her identity. For Murakami, translating a female writer and writing about female characters intersect in one key way. They both give voice to the vulnerable, especially children and women. Thank you for listening.
Wonderful presentation.